Good afternoon, and welcome to Consular Conversations Live. My name is Vice Consul Andrew Covton, and joining me here today is Deputy Consul General Maureen Smith. I want to remind everyone that you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at US Embassy JA, and that you can always find general consular-related questions related to the embassy here in Kingston, Jamaica at jm.usembassy.gov. Our next session will be the final one for the year, and it will take place on December 20th, when we will be focusing on immigrant visas and specifically the topic of boarding foils. But today, we will focus on student and exchange visitor visas, which fall under our non-immigrant visa class. And before we begin our conversation with Maureen, I do want to note that the consular section here at the U.S. Embassy in Kingston has allocated significant resources to reduce the long wait times for B1 and B2 visa interview appointments. Tourist visa applications that require an interview should be prepared well in advance of travel. Please note that these are the following wait times that we have for various non-immigrant visa applications. So for the student and exchange visitors, the FMJ visas, it's currently 8 days to receive an appointment. For petition-based workers, that's H, L, O, P, and Q visas, it's 5 days. For crew and transit visas, that's C, D, C1/D visas, it's also 5 days. And then for your standard B1, B2 visas, it's 35 days. So significantly shorter than it has been before, but still some advanced planning is required. And so Maureen, welcome. It's been very great to be working with you here at the U.S. Embassy in Kingston. You've been here for more than a few months now, and it's a pleasure to have you back. If you don't mind, could you tell us a little bit about those student and exchange visitor visas?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So as Andrew mentioned, this month we're highlighting FMJ visas, which are student and exchange visitor visas. They are types of visas that we have virtually no wait time in order to apply, but there's quite a bit of pre-work that you have to do. So first you have to decide what type of school you want to go to or what type of exchange visitor program you want to participate in. And you need to research a little bit and apply to those schools or those programs in the US. The reason why is that the school or the program needs to issue you what's called an I-20 form or a DS 2019 form. So if you don't know where to start, one good place if you are a student wishing to study in the US is to go to a website that's actually run by the Department of Homeland Security. And I really like this website because you can search by location. So if you know, for example, that you really want to study in Manhattan, or you really want to study in Miami, maybe you have family there, so you have someone to stay with, for example, then you can go to that website and you can put in Miami, and then it will bring up all of the schools that can issue you an I-20, so that then you can apply for a student visa here with us in Kingston. Another concern sometimes from students is, how am I going to pay for my program? So one way is through personal funds. So if your family has the ability to pay for your studies in the US. Another way, a great resource that I really like is Education USA. And we're going to put that website on the program right now as well. And there, currently the embassy does not have an Education USA representative here in Kingston, but there is there's lots and lots of information on the Education USA website. And there you can see tips on how to select a program, how to pay for it, and how to prepare for your trip to the United States, including applying for the visa. So the visa is actually the last step in the process. Another great resource is travel.state.gov. So there's a couple of areas on that website. One is about student visas in particular. And another one is about exchange visitors, because within the J category, which is exchange visitors, there are many different programs. There's everything from being a student, being a research scholar, being an intern, being an au pair, a camp counselor. There's lots of different either study or work programs within that exchange visitor category, also known as the J1 visa. So you can research more those programs and the different types of employment or studies that you could do under a J visa. And the M visa is another type of student visa that is for vocational or technical schools. So we really encourage people to study in the US. Once you have your I-20 or DS 2019 from the school, that is the time that you apply for a visa with us here in Kingston. And so we'll also display for you the website on how to make an appointment, which basically just involves creating an account, paying, and then you proceed to schedule your appointment, which again, we have virtually no wait time for student and exchange visitor interview appointments.
What kind of physical documents should applicants bear in mind that they should bring once they do have an appointment scheduled?
That's a great question. So in addition to the I-120 form that the school in the United States will issue you once you have been accepted to their study program, or the DS 2019, which is the form that the exchange visitor program will issue you once you've been accepted to their program, you definitely need to bring those documents to your interview. Also, if your program is one where you need to pay something, for example, to study in the US rather than them paying you, because if you're going as a camp counselor or as an au pair, they're going to be paying you. But if you're going to be paying to participate in a program, you should bring documents to show how you're going to pay for that program. Some programs might be less expensive than others. For example, there are public schools in the US that will issue the I-20, and so those programs will be less expensive, and you can still get a great education, whereas some universities in the US might be quite expensive, and so you would want to bring to the interview any documents that show how it is that you will pay for your program. And applicants are free to bring any documents as well that will help prove their ties to Jamaica. So applicants need to show that they will return to Jamaica after a program ends in the US. And how do you do that? You prove that you have a good socioeconomic situation here that will compel you to return after your trip to the United States. And that's the same for tourist visas as well. You just need to prove to the consular officer, the American consular officer who interviews you inside the embassy, that you intend to return after a short trip to the US.
Thank you very much, Maureen. That was a lot of information and all very useful. I want to remind the audience that the links that Maureen just mentioned, they're available below on this screen on the scroll bar, and you can always feel free to reference them after this show. Maureen, there were two things that you mentioned. You said the word au pair. Now that sounds French. Could you tell me what that means?
Yes, absolutely. That's a program where you are a nanny or a babysitter, usually living with a family. And usually I think that there's a requirement to study a certain number of hours per week. And it's a great program that a lot of people from all around the world participate in. It's a great chance to go to the US and earn some money and also learn about another culture.
And the family that hosts you gets a chance to learn a little bit about your culture as well, right?
Exactly.
Very cool. So if you would like to learn more about that, please feel free to visit travel.state.gov or Google au pair, that's spelled A-U space P-A-I-R, to learn more about how you can apply for one of those exchange visitor visas. And then separately, you mentioned tourism. So if someone comes as a student or as a camp counselor and they do their program, but then they want to add on a visit to Disney World in Orlando, do they need to get a separate tourist visa, or how do those exchange visitor visas work?
It's fine to to participate in your study or exchange visitor program. So you enter on that visa, the F, M, or J. And then let's say at the end of your time, you're done working or you're done studying and you want to go down to Orlando for a week at Disney. That's fine to do. You don't need to come and get a separate visa, because that trip to Orlando is for tourism and it's incidental to the main purpose of travel. So you entered on the correct visa as a student or exchange visitor, and then you went to Orlando for, to go to Disney for a week. Now, if you finish your program, come back to Jamaica and your F, M, or J visa is still valid, you cannot enter on that visa if the purpose of your trip, of this new trip, is to go on as a tourist to Orlando. You would have to apply for a B visa. B1, B2 is the category, and that's the category for tourism and business. You would need to apply for that visa in order to enter as a tourist.
So someone with 2 valid visas in their passport, they would need to indicate at the border which visa they're using to enter the United States.
Exactly. We have a lot of applicants who already have a tourist visa, and then they come in and apply for an F, M, or J visa to go as a student or exchange visitor. And it's a good idea when you enter the US to point out, on this trip, I'm going to study at X school. Here is my F visa, and present that visa so that then it's clear to the US immigration agent what your purpose of travel is.
And if the school requires some form of in-person interview during the application process, does someone need to have a student visa to go visit the school to interview?
That's a good question. So especially now that COVID happened, most of the programs will do the interview virtually. And so they should be able to interview you virtually. And a lot of the programs, especially the J programs, will want to interview applicants because it's basically a third-party company that will probably interview you and then issue you that DS 2019 so that then you can apply for the exchange visitor visa. So it's not someone from the US government who is interviewing you for the DS 2019 for the exchange visitor visa. That is at the very end when you come into the embassy in Kingston. So most interviews should happen virtually. If for some reason they do require an in-person interview to see if they're going to accept you to the program, you would do that on a B tourist visa.
And if someone is applying for a exchange program, OPRA program, any of the type of student or exchange visitor programs we discussed, and the provider through which that they're applying is charging them a fee for a visa, is that money that goes to the US government?
No, it is not money that goes to the US government. However, it is normal that those third-party companies charge a fee. Each company charges different amounts. So you can also shop around to see what company might be best fit to your needs. But it is normal that they charge a fee in order to interview you and issue you the I-20 or the DS 2019. So especially for the J exchange visitor visas, it is normal that if they're going to hire you, for example, as a camp counselor, that they charge you a fee. But then you earn money while you're there. So that's one way to earn back the money, basically.
And is there any predetermined amount of time that these visas are good for?
Yes, we have a reciprocity schedule for Jamaica, just like for every country in the world. And so normally for the student visas, it's, I believe it's 4 years, if I'm not mistaken, that the visa is valid for. However, if we see that the program is a very short program, we might limit the visa. Whereas if you plan to go to college in the US for 4 years, we would issue it for that amount. And then for the exchange visitor visas, the Js, we would limit it to the length of the program.
Got it. So if someone plans, 2 consecutive summers of working as a camp counselor, they should plan to come in for 2 separate visa interviews.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense. So we'll wrap up this information session on FMJ visitor visas. Just to remind you, it's currently an 8-day wait time for those, but a 35-day wait time for standard B1, B2 tourist visas. So please keep that in mind as you have travel plans coming up ahead. The best thing that you can do is to travel fully prepared and have a visa issued well in advance of your travel. There's a very high demand for non-immigrant visa processing right now, and so the embassy can only consider expediting a very limited number of dire and urgent cases. If you have travel planned to Disney World and you forgot to schedule your B1, B2 visa interview appointment in time, unfortunately, that will not qualify for a dire and emergency need. Should you have any further questions, you can always visit our U.S. Embassy Kingston, Jamaica website at jm.usembassy.gov. And for non-immigrant visa-specific questions, you can also email kingstonniv@state.gov. So, Maureen, we're about at the halfway point of the show, so we'll transition a bit into some Q&A right now.
Sure.
And I will intersperse a few public service announcements in the middle of it all.
Sure.
So our first question is from Omar on Twitter. He says, I don't want to go to school in the United States, but I want to do a work exchange or training. I have a degree in hospitality management. Are there exchange programs for me?
Yes, there are. I would encourage you to go to travel.state.gov. And when you click there, and you'll see a part about visas, and then there's a separate part that says study and exchange. So I would look there first. There may be some other programs that involve a work visa that is with a approved petition from the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service. That's a little bit more involved, but the J visa is a lighter lift in terms of getting the necessary paperwork to then apply for the J visa here with us in Kingston.
Thank you. We have Philip on YouTube asking a immigrant visa related question, saying, what is administrative processing and how long does it take?
Oh, good question. Okay, so whether you are applying in the non-immigrant visa unit, which is where we issue the tourist or work visas, or the immigrant visa unit, which is for residency visas, so people who want to live in the US permanently, sometimes you might have administrative processing. So unfortunately, we cannot get into details with the public about what that means. What we will do is we will always inform you in writing at your interview if you need some administrative processing. We will also tell you if we need you to do anything. So maybe you might need to provide us with more documents, or maybe you might have to fill out an additional form for us. It just depends on the type of administrative processing we need to do for your visa request. Or maybe there is nothing that you need to do. So you should be informed both verbally and in writing if you need to take any action or if you just need to wait. So I'm sorry that I can't offer more details.
Thank you, Maureen. We have Claudine on YouTube also asking a immigrant visa related question, but this pertains to permanent residency cards. She says, I'm a green card holder, but I lost my green card here in Jamaica. How do I get back to the United States without my green card? Do I need a new one?
So I'm sorry that you lost your green card, Claudine, but this leads me nicely into a public service announcement that I wanted to give, which is about our Visa Navigator. So if you go to our embassy website, jm.usembassy.gov, and then you scroll down a little bit and it says, I need a, and you can choose US visa. You click there, and then the first thing that comes up is it says, contact us. And to the right, there's a part that says Visa Navigator. You need to click there, and then you need to answer some questions because it's going to bring you to some really important pages, and it's going to give you an important code. So if you lost your green card, then you need to get the right code from the website and then email us. If you email us without the code, we will not get your email. So it's really important that you access that website if you're writing to us as a tourist business visa applicant or an immigrant visa applicant. You need to get that code, and with that code, you put it in the subject line, and then you email us. That way we can respond to your inquiry in a timely manner. We're going to give you, in the case of green cards that are lost or stolen, we can issue you what's called a boarding foil, which is the topic for next month. And we will have some forms that you'll need to fill out ahead of time, and something you need to pay online before you come in, and some documents that you'll need to bring. And you can actually see all of that as well in the Visa Navigator. But yeah, we have many requests for boarding foils for legal permanent residents who've lost their green card.
And Maureen just mentioned our last Consular Conversations live session on December 20th at 1 o'clock local time will focus on boarding foils. So we'll go a little bit further on this topic. But while this might be too late for you, Claudine, for everyone else listening, I do want to highlight that the fees for boarding foils are quite steep. And so to please keep that in mind when traveling overseas. If you are a legal permanent resident, please safeguard your green card as you would any other personal travel document. It is very important that you have it on your person when you travel back to the United States. And for those that are not present in Jamaica, but need to go through the U.S. Embassy in Kingston, you ultimately will need to be present here should you be applying for a boarding foil to the United States. First thing that comes to mind is residents of the Cayman Islands who are also legal permanent residents of the United States. If you lose your green card while traveling in Cayman or elsewhere, you will need to be in person here at the U.S. Embassy in Kingston, and we'll need to arrange everything required in order to be here in person. One other public service announcement before we move on to further questions. I do want to advise those watching who are not currently in Jamaica that the U.S. State Department's travel advisory for Jamaica right now is a level 3, which is reconsider travel. So if you are considering making travel plans to Jamaica, please be aware that we are at a level 3 because of crime rates right now. Levels of violent crime are quite high, and so it is something to consider before making travel plans to Jamaica. Should you have any further questions, you can always read the full text of the advisory at travel.state.gov when you select Jamaica in the drop-down of the country you are interested in reading about. So right now we have a question from Lorraine on YouTube, and we're on a roll here with immigrant visa questions. Lorraine says, what happens if I can't get a medical appointment until after my already scheduled IV interview? What do I do?
Thank you for the question, and we are glad to hear that our immigrant visa applicants are trying to get an appointment as soon as they get their appointment letter from the National Visa Center in New Hampshire, saying your day and time of your appointment here in Kingston. We need people to make their appointments right away with the panel physician. You are not allowed to go to other physicians or other hospitals. It's only at Andrews Memorial Hospital. That is our certified panel physician. And if you cannot get an appointment until after your interview appointment, please come to your interview anyway. And then we will just need to pend your case. We will need to put your case on hold until we get the results of your medical exam.
Okay, that's very good to know. I think this reminds me, if someone has a family that one parent is a U.S. citizen, another parent is Jamaican citizen, and they have a child here in Jamaica, the child may or may not be eligible for U.S. citizenship, and the other parent may or may not be in the process of applying for an immigrant visa. So I think this is a good time to bring up that if you believe that your child is a U.S. citizen, you should prioritize that application so that the immigrant visa process, which can take substantially longer, doesn't hold up your application for U.S. citizenship. Because while your child receiving U.S. citizenship doesn't accelerate the immigrant visa process in any way, the clock does start ticking as soon as an immigrant visa is issued. And so you don't want any delays in the citizenship application process for the child to impact the time of arrival of the entire family to the United States. So what that means is go ahead and schedule an appointment by visiting jm.usembassy.gov for a consular report of birth abroad application, or a U.S. passport application if the child is over the age of 18 and has a claim to U.S. citizenship, and separately schedule an immigrant visa appointment and go through the immigrant visa process. The reason I bring this up is we often have families come in and applying for citizenship for their child, and then they think they can just walk over to the immigrant visa section and file for an immigrant visa right then and there. Is that right, Maureen? You can't just do it on the spot.
That's correct. You cannot do it on the spot, and that brings up an important point where, so the law has varied over the years, but if you are a U.S. citizen and you have a child in Jamaica, in general, the rule to transmit your U.S. citizenship is that you had to have been a U.S. citizen before the child was born. So if you naturalized after the child was born, all bets are off. So before the child was born, you had to have been a U.S. citizen. And in general, you have to prove that you lived in the U.S. for 5 years, 2 of which were after the age of 14. And again, the law has varied over the years, so your circumstance might be a little bit different and the requirement might be a little bit different. It's too complicated to explain right now on screen. And if you can't prove that, then the other option, as you mentioned, is that you can apply for an immigrant visa for the child. But in order to do that, it's a much more lengthy process that involves filing an immigrant visa petition, the petition then going to the National Visa Center in New Hampshire, and the whole process could take a year or more. So it is much more involved. And if you do think your child has a claim to U.S. citizenship, you should go ahead and apply for a consular report of birth abroad or a U.S. passport.
Thank you, Maureen. We have Stacey Ann on Twitter asking, is a COVID vaccine still required to immigrate to the United States? How will I know if I meet the vaccine requirement?
So it's a little bit of a complicated question. To travel to the U.S. as a non-immigrant, so in other words, you're traveling as a tourist or a student to the United States, the vaccine is no longer required. For immigrant visa applicants, technically it is still required along with many other vaccines, but if the vaccine is not available in country, then you will still pass your medical exam. And so it's a little bit of a complicated question to answer, but in theory, it is still required for immigrant visa applicants. But if it is not available in country, like if Jamaica does not have the vaccine available, then that requirement would be waived and you would still pass your medical exam.
So we are close to the end of our show today, but we do have 2 questions remaining, and we'll extend the show a little bit if necessary to answer these questions. We have Rohan on Facebook's asking, what are the processing wait times for a spousal filing? And for example, if a wife is filing for a husband.
Okay, so for an immigrant visa, if a U.S. citizen is applying for their spouse, the wait time, so right now, I can't really answer on behalf of the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service, which is the first step of the process. They have to first approve the petition. So right now, the petition approval is taking approximately 8 to 9 months. Then the petition goes to the National Visa Center in New Hampshire, And you can find lots of information about the immigrant visa process on travel.state.gov. Then just click on immigrant visas, or you can even just Google National Visa Center travel.state.gov. That's the easiest way to find it. Once it's at the National Visa Center, they will collect fees from the U.S. citizen petitioner, and they will collect documents. So for example, the marriage certificate and lots of other documents. Once you send in all of those documents, then they will schedule the interview appointment here in Kingston. So right now, I would say that the total process overall between the petition approval and getting an appointment here is probably around 1.5 years.
Okay, that makes sense. So Rohan, if you are sensitive to the timeline, the sooner you and your wife can start this process, the better it will be for both of you. And finally, I will ask Alicia's question on Facebook. When will the visa bulletin move in favor of the family categories? My family has been documentarily qualified since 2021, and our police certificates are about to expire.
That is a good question, but when embassies outside of the United States don't have any kind of influence over the visa bulletin and when the categories will be current. So that is all determined by Washington, D.C., and so you just have to keep checking the visa bulletin each month to see if your priority date is current, which means that then the National Visa Center will be able to schedule your interview appointment in Kingston.
Thank you very much, Maureen. So that's all the questions that we had today. I want to remind everyone that we have one final show before the end of the year, scheduled for December 20th, when we will focus on immigrant visa topics and on boarding foils specifically. Remember, you can always follow us at US Embassy JA on Twitter and Facebook, and you can also follow us on YouTube. You can visit our website at jm.usembassy.gov for the U.S. Embassy in Kingston's website. I want to thank my guest today, Maureen Smith, our Deputy Consul General here in Kingston. And I want to thank you all for joining us here today. We'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.